As he stepped out of the car, a faint cry carried by the wind caught his attention. Following the sound into the bush, he discovered a tiny, shivering baby abandoned in a basket. Who would leave a child alone in such a desolate place? With a heavy heart, he took the fragile infant into his arms and drove home. But what happens next? Who abandoned the baby, and why? Join us as we uncover the mystery in this gripping story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.
Like and subscribe.
Bella was a beautiful young woman who lived with her parents in the bustling city of Enugu. She had a charming personality and an undeniable allure that made her the center of attention wherever she went. However, Bella was not interested in love or serious relationships. She enjoyed the company of different men, but her primary interest was their wealth. To her, love was secondary. What mattered most was the luxurious lifestyle she could enjoy by being with wealthy men. Marriage or commitment was not something she was willing to consider. One bright afternoon, Bella decided to visit a popular supermarket to pick up a few items. As she strolled through the aisles, carefully selecting the things she needed, she suddenly bumped into a handsome young man. The impact sent her groceries tumbling to the floor. Shocked and irritated, she turned to see who had disrupted her shopping. "I am so sorry," the young man quickly apologized. His deep voice was filled with sincerity. Bella looked at him angrily, ready to lash out, but before she could say anything, the man had already bent down to gather her items. His chivalrous act softened her initial anger. At the checkout counter, the young man insisted on paying for her groceries. "You don't have to," Bella said, raising an eyebrow. "Please, let me. It's the least I can do after causing the mess," he replied with a warm smile. Bella hesitated but eventually let him. After making the payment, the man turned to her and said, "I am Abraham." Bella smiled and replied, "I am Bella." Abraham then asked, "May I have your phone number?" Bella studied him for a moment before nodding. "Okay, you can have it," she said. They exchanged contacts, and from that moment, they kept in touch, unknowingly setting the stage for an unexpected journey. As time passed, Abraham found himself deeply in love with Bella. He adored everything about her, the way she smiled, the way she carried herself, and the way she made him feel whenever they were together. Wanting to spend as much time with her as possible, he took her to the finest restaurants and the most luxurious hotels, ensuring that every moment they shared was special. To Abraham, their relationship was real and meaningful. He was ready to commit, believing that Bella felt the same way. However, Bella had an entirely different plan. While she enjoyed the attention and lavish lifestyle Abraham provided, she was not ready to settle down. Unbeknownst to him, she continued seeing her numerous other boyfriends, each serving a different purpose in her extravagant life. She played her role well, making Abraham believe he was the only one, while secretly indulging in her carefree and deceptive lifestyle. One evening, Abraham invited Bella to a lavish cafe, one of the most elegant spots in the city. The warm glow of chandeliers reflected off the polished floors, and soft music played in the background. Bella arrived, dressed in an elegant gown, expecting yet another luxurious evening filled with fine dining and pleasant conversation. However, she had no idea what Abraham had planned. As they finished their meal, Abraham suddenly stood up, reached into his pocket, and then, to Bella's shock, knelt down before her. Gasps and murmurs filled the cafe as diners turned to witness the scene. Holding a gleaming diamond ring, his eyes shone with sincerity. "Since I met you, I have never seen a woman as beautiful and kind as you," he said with deep emotion. "Can I have the honor of making you my wife?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Bella flared up. "You should have told me before bringing me here to disgrace me," she snapped. Her voice carried an edge of irritation. "I am not ready for marriage." Abraham's heart shattered. The cafe, once filled with warmth, now felt cold and distant. Without another word, he slipped the ring back into his pocket, stood up, and walked away, leaving Bella to deal with the murmurs and stares of the other diners. Heartbroken and humiliated, Abraham knew he could no longer stay in Enugu, where memories of Bella haunted him. He needed a fresh start, a new environment where he could heal and rebuild his life. Within days, he packed his belongings and moved to Port Harcourt, determined to leave his past behind. Upon arriving, fate led him to reconnect with Vera, an old university friend who had always been fond of him. Unlike Bella, Vera was warm, sincere, and genuinely cared for Abraham's happiness. She listened to him, supported him, and brought light into his life when he needed it most. As they spent more time together, their friendship blossomed into something deeper. Abraham found in Vera what he had always longed for: true love and commitment. Before long, their bond grew so strong that they decided to get married, beginning a new chapter filled with love, trust, and happiness. Back in Enugu, Bella's once carefree lifestyle was beginning to catch up with her. Her parents, deeply concerned about her future, constantly scolded her for her reckless ways. "My daughter, you are no longer a child," her father cautioned one evening, his voice laced with frustration. "Many of your age mates are in their husband's house, yet you are here, exchanging men like wrappers. Is this the life you want for yourself?" Bella rolled her eyes but remained silent. Her mother, more gentle in her approach, sighed and took her hand. "My dear, your father and I love you. We want what is best for you. It's time you start thinking about your future before it's too late." At first, Bella ignored their words. But a few weeks after Abraham left, she began noticing unexpected changes in her body, changes that filled her with anxiety and fear. Bella paced around her room, anxiety tightening its grip on her. She placed a hand on her stomach, a sinking feeling growing inside her. "This is not normal. Something is wrong," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Could it be malaria? Typhoid? Or am I pregnant?" The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She had never considered the consequences of her reckless lifestyle, until now. Unable to shake her fears, she rushed to the hospital the next morning for a checkup. As she sat in the waiting room, her heart pounded. When the doctor finally called her in, she could barely breathe. "Congratulations, you are 3 weeks pregnant," the doctor announced with a warm smile. Bella's world spun. Confusion and frustration flooded her mind. "Pregnant? But who is responsible?" she whispered in horror. "Abraham? James? Tunde? Or even our landlord?" For the first time, she realized the mess she had created. Desperate and terrified, Bella was not ready to become a mother. The thought of carrying an unwanted pregnancy filled her with dread. She frantically searched for ways to get rid of it, trying different drugs and local herbs she had heard about. Every night, she hoped to wake up and find the problem gone, but nothing worked. Weeks passed, and despite all her efforts, the pregnancy remained. Her body began to change, and reality started to sink in. There was no escaping this. She had no option but to carry the pregnancy to term. However, Bella was determined to keep it a secret, especially from her parents. She wore loose-fitting clothes, avoided family gatherings, and withdrew from her usual social life. She knew that if her parents found out, their disappointment would be unbearable. But how long could she hide such a life-altering secret before the truth came out? One morning, unable to bear the weight of her secret any longer, Bella packed her bags and approached her parents with a fabricated story. "I've secured a job in Port Harcourt," she announced, forcing a smile. Her parents, though surprised, were pleased. They wished her well, completely unaware that she was not leaving for work but running away, to a place where no one knew her, where she could hide her shame. 9 months later, in the quiet loneliness of her small rented apartment in Port Harcourt, Bella gave birth to a healthy baby girl. No family, no friends, just her and the newborn. She had hoped that after the birth, she could figure things out, but instead, an unexpected revelation shattered her. "The baby, she can't see." Bella cried, panic rising in her chest. She stared at the fragile child in her arms, her mind racing with dark thoughts. "This baby will restrict my freedom," she thought bitterly. "Since she refused to be taken out in the womb, I have to do away with her." A cruel plan began forming in her mind. She had spent her life chasing pleasure and wealth, and now, this helpless child threatened to take it all away. Bella wasn't ready to be a mother. She wasn't ready for sacrifice. And so, with a hardened heart, she resolved to rid herself of the burden, no matter what it took. One evening, under the cover of darkness, Bella carried out her plan. She placed the tiny baby in a basket, wrapped her in a cloth, and quietly made her way to a nearby bush. Her heart pounded, but she convinced herself it was the only way. Without looking back, she set the basket down among the dry leaves and hurried away. The baby's weak cries faded into the night as Bella returned home, packed her bags, and left Port Harcourt. She returned to Enugu, slipping back into her old life as if nothing had happened. That same evening, Abraham was driving home from work when he suddenly felt the urge to stop by the roadside to relieve himself. As he stepped out of the car, he heard a faint cry carried by the wind. "Whose child could be crying in such a lonely place?" he murmured, his brow furrowing. Curious and concerned, he followed the sound into the bush. There, hidden in the shadows, he spotted a small basket. He bent down, peeking inside, and gasped. A tiny baby, weak and shivering, lay wrapped inside. Who would abandon a baby in the bush in this day and age? He wondered aloud, his heart aching at the sight. Without hesitation, he lifted the fragile infant into his arms. She was light, too light, and her cries were feeble. Carefully, he carried her to his car, placed her gently on the seat, and drove home. When he arrived home, his wife, Vera, was carefully setting the dining table for their evening meal. As soon as she saw him, she noticed the small bundle in his arms. He explained everything, how he had found the abandoned child and rescued her. Vera was overcome with emotion, tears welling in her eyes as she realized the miracle before them. They decided to name the baby Joy, a name that perfectly suited the happiness she soon brought into their home. Though she was blind, they made sure she never felt disadvantaged. They raised her as their own, showering her with love, care, and everything she needed. They bought her beautiful dresses, soft toys, and taught her how to navigate the house independently. Over time, Joy adapted effortlessly, moving confidently through the home. Her laughter filled every corner, and their once quiet house became a place of warmth and love. One evening, Abraham returned home with an unusual excitement in his eyes. He could barely contain his happiness as he stepped through the door. "Honey, what's making you so happy?" Vera asked curiously, setting down the book she had been reading. Abraham took a deep breath, his face beaming with hope. "My love, I met a specialist today, someone who can treat Joy's eyes." Vera gasped, her hands covering her mouth in shock. "Are you serious? Is there really a chance?" "Yes." Abraham nodded eagerly. "The doctor is confident that with surgery, Joy will be able to see." Without hesitation, they booked an appointment. The days leading up to the surgery were filled with prayers and anticipation. When the day finally arrived, they held Joy's hands as she was wheeled into the operating room. Hours later, the doctor emerged with a reassuring smile. The surgery was successful. Tears of joy streamed down Vera's face as they waited for Joy to wake up. When she finally opened her eyes, she blinked several times, adjusting to the light. Then, for the first time, she saw Abraham and Vera beside her. "Mom! Dad!" she whispered. Their hearts swelled with happiness. Nothing could compare to this moment. Years later, when Joy turned 7, she suddenly fell seriously ill. Feverish and weak, she could barely sit up, and Abraham and Vera rushed her to the hospital. They paced anxiously in the waiting room, their hearts pounding with fear as they awaited the doctor's report. A few hours later, the doctor approached them with a somber expression. "Doctor, what is the situation? How is our daughter?" Abraham asked, his voice filled with desperation. "She is improving, but there is a complication," the doctor replied. "What is it?" Abraham pressed, gripping Vera's hand tightly. "She has a severe blood shortage. We need an urgent transfusion, or her condition could worsen." Without hesitation, Vera stepped forward. "Doctor, please take my blood," she pleaded. However, after testing, they discovered that her blood type did not match Joy's. When Abraham was tested, The results surprised everyone. His blood type was a perfect match. The doctor even remarked on how identical their genetic markers were. A strange feeling stirred inside Abraham. Driven by curiosity, he requested a DNA test. The wait was agonizing, but when the results finally arrived, they revealed a shocking truth. Joy was biologically his daughter. His mind raced. How was this possible? Had fate led him to his own child all those years ago? Staring at the results in disbelief, he realized that the little girl he had rescued was not just a blessing in disguise. She was his own flesh and blood. Though relieved that Joy's life had been saved, the shocking discovery created tension between Abraham and Vera. The once harmonious home was now filled with uncertainty and unspoken questions. That evening, as Joy slept peacefully, Vera confronted Abraham, her voice trembling with a mix of hurt and disbelief. "How did Joy become your child, Abraham?" she asked, arms crossed. "Does this mean you've been lying to me all this time?" Abraham's eyes widened. "Vera, I swear, I have no idea how this happened," he said, shaking his head. "I found Joy abandoned that night. I told you everything. I never knew she was mine." Vera searched his face for any signs of deception, but all she saw was the same confusion she felt. She wanted to believe him, yet the truth weighed heavily on her heart. If Joy was truly his daughter, who was her mother? Despite the lingering tension, neither of them let it affect their love for Joy. She remained their top priority, and they continued to shower her with affection, just as they always had. They tucked her in at night, read her favorite stories, and held her close, unwilling to let their uncertainty disrupt her happiness. But deep inside, questions remained unanswered. Vera couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, and Abraham silently vowed to uncover the truth. He needed to know who had abandoned Joy that night, and how was she his daughter. Meanwhile, 6 years had passed since Bella's wedding, yet she remained childless. The burden of infertility weighed heavily on her, and the pressure from her husband and in-laws was unbearable. Whispers spread through the family, and every passing day felt like a silent judgment. "Maybe she's cursed," some murmured. "What kind of woman fails to bear children?" others whispered behind her back. The strain took a toll on her marriage, but Bella endured, clinging to the hope that one day she would conceive. One fateful afternoon, while walking with her husband through the marketplace, a ragged madman suddenly appeared. His wild eyes locked onto Bella, and he pointed an accusing finger at her. "You are looking for children while you abandoned your first child in the bush," he bellowed. The words struck like thunder. Bella's husband froze, his face darkening with shock. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Bella hesitated, her heart pounding. Shame and fear consumed her, but she could no longer hide. She lowered her gaze and nodded. Enraged, her husband stormed home, gathered her belongings, and threw them outside. "I never knew I was living with a heartless woman," he spat. "Get out!" Tears streamed down Bella's face as she realized the weight of her past mistake. Now, she had lost everything: her marriage, her dignity, and the love of her parents. Desperate and filled with regret, Bella embarked on a journey to find the daughter she had abandoned years ago. With nothing but determination, she traveled to Port Harcourt, the very place where her past mistake haunted her the most. As soon as she arrived, she headed straight to the bush where she had left her baby all those years ago. To her shock, the once isolated area had transformed, now bustling with buildings and roads. There was no trace of the spot where she had made the most painful decision of her life. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to give up. "No matter how long it takes, I will find my daughter," she vowed. Day after day, she searched tirelessly, asking strangers, knocking on doors, and wandering the streets in hopes of a miracle. But with no leads and exhaustion taking over, she grew weaker. One afternoon, after countless hours of searching under the scorching sun, Bella collapsed in front of a school. Coincidentally, at that very moment, Vera and Joy were stepping out of the school gates. Vera gasped at the sight of the frail woman lying on the ground. Feeling an overwhelming sense of pity, she rushed forward. "Madam, are you okay?" Vera asked as she gently helped her up. "Bella, too weak to hide her sorrow, burst into tears. Between sobs, she explained her story, every word striking a chord with Vera. The details sounded eerily familiar. Vera exchanged a glance with Joy, then turned back to Bella. "Come with us, freshen up, and have some water," she offered kindly. With nowhere else to go, Bella nodded and silently followed them home, unaware of the shocking truth she was about to uncover. Later that evening, Abraham arrived home, exhausted from the day's work. As he stepped into the house, his eyes immediately landed on Bella sitting on the couch. His expression darkened, and anger flared in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp with disbelief. Bella flinched, guilt washing over her. Before she could respond, Vera turned to her husband, confused. "Wait, you two know each other?" she asked, looking from Abraham to Bella. Abraham clenched his fists. "She was my past, Vera. But I never expected to see her here, in my own home." Tears welled up in Bella's eyes as she took a deep breath and finally confessed everything. The truth about her past mistake, her marriage, and the desperate search for her lost child. Silence filled the room as Abraham and Vera processed the shocking revelation. The abandoned baby Bella spoke of was the very same Joy they had raised and loved as their own daughter. Finally, they called Joy into the sitting room, their hearts heavy with the weight of the truth they were about to reveal. Abraham and Vera sat on either side of her, while Bella nervously wiped her tears, unsure of how her daughter would react. Gently, Abraham took Joy's hand. "Sweetheart, there is something important we need to tell you," he said softly. Joy looked up at them with curious eyes as Vera continued. "The woman sitting here, Bella, she is your biological mother." Joy blinked, trying to process the words. She turned to Bella, who was already crying. "My child," Bella whispered, her voice trembling. "I made a terrible mistake years ago. I was young and afraid, and I abandoned you. I have lived with regret ever since. Please, can you ever forgive me?" There was a long silence as Joy sat quietly, trying to process the shocking truth she had just learned. Her heart ached, but she remained calm. Joy's voice trembled, yet she held her ground. "So you're telling me, my parents aren't my real parents?" Bella could barely meet her eyes. The shame, the guilt, it was suffocating. "No matter my condition," Joy continued, her voice laced with quiet pain, "you had no right to abandon me, to leave me in the bush like I was nothing." Bella shattered. The weight of her choices pressed down on her chest, stealing her breath. Tears streamed down her face, raw and unrelenting. She wished, oh, how she wished, she could rewrite the past, cradle the baby she had once forsaken, undo the unbearable regret. Then, softly, Joy spoke again. "But I forgive you." Bella's sobs turned ragged, disbelieving. She looked up, eyes blurred, searching Joy's face for resentment, for anger, but there was only kindness. "My daddy and mummy," Joy whispered. "They are my parents. They always will be." Bella wept harder, caught between sorrow and relief. The truth had unraveled, the past could not change, yet love endured. Joy had found the missing piece of her story, but her heart, unshaken, remained with the ones who had raised her, cherished her, and chosen her.
Like and subscribe.